Welcome back. In this chapter we'll learn about Express.js, a common and very useful framework that helps simplify web app development in Node.js. Some of you may have heard of the MEAN stack before, which stands for MongoDB, Express, Angular and Node. We will learn about three aspects of that framework. MongoDB, which is a database pairing that's common with Node.js, Express, which we'll learn about in this chapter and use throughout the rest of the course, and Node, which we've already learned about and will continue to learn about on this course. We won't cover Angular because it's a front-end component. The MEAN stack is perhaps the most commonly used stack that uses Node.js because they all work well together. Express is used in the vast majority of Node.js apps developed simply because it's a very mature, minimalist framework that provides a lot of useful functionality that helps speed up web application development significantly. We'll learn about Express in this module, and I'll introduce you to the key concepts that make Express so useful, and at the end of the course we'll end with a mini project which will be similar to chapter 2, where we serve a static web page except using Express this time. From then on in the course we'll rely on Express to speed up development when it comes to the more complicated projects later on. In the next video, we'll learn about the basics of Express and why it's so useful. Welcome back. In this video, we're going to create a basic Hello World app with Express and also use another module called Helmet. Now, I'm going to go into coding pretty much straight away, but you first need to initialize an Npm package if you're following on at home by using npm init, as I showed you in chapter 1. And you're also going to want to install the modules Express and Helmet, spelled exactly how you'd expect. And then we'll begin coding. So the first thing we're going to want to do is to import both modules that I just said. So we're going to do console Express, also require Express, and then the same for Helmet, like so. Okay, so now we're going to create an app. So the first thing we do is create a constant called app and set it to a new instance of Express like that. Then we're going to want to use Helmet, and we do this by saying app.use Helmet. Now, you might be wondering, what is Helmet? Helmet is a module that provides a set of useful security features by default that will help protect your app against hacking. So I won't go into exact details about what it provides, but it provides some very useful features, and if you're interested in the details, then you can look up the Helmet module on NPM and it will give you a list of the features it provides. But from now on, we should always use Helmet as security best practices. Helmet alone isn't enough to ensure your app is secure from all attacks. There's lots more you must do to make sure your apps are secure, and we'll go into more detail about web security later on in the course, but for now this will do. So now to do a Hello World app, we're just going to simply do app.get / and then our usual callback function, like this. And then type res.send hello world. And then app.listen on our port number, which in this case I'm going to choose as 8080 as usual. Now this looks pretty similar to our Hello World app in Node.js, but the efficiencies and the helpfulness of Express will become more obvious in later tutorials. But for now, this is the Hello World app, and let me just run it quickly to show you that it works. I'm just going to cd into the directory quickly, cd there, and then node server.js, and then if we open up localhost, like so, you'll see we've got Hello World here. So that's a quick Hello World app with Express, and in the next video we'll go over routing in Express, which is one of its most useful features. Welcome back. In this video we'll learn about Express routing, which is one of its most useful features. On my screen now you can see the official Express website with their text-based tutorial for routing. If you'd prefer a text-based tutorial, this is the resource for you, but here I will do my best to explain it with examples. We won't cover all of the features of routing in this video, only the most commonly used ones, but we will cover all of the features of routing later on down the line when we come to more complicated projects. So on the screen now you can see some code, and it's simply an extension of the Hello World app we covered in the last video. The highlighted code now is all the code that we had from the last video. But even here we have an example of routing. So let's break down this line here. App.get is basically saying we're looking for a request that uses the get HTTP method. And then the second parameter, the first parameter to the function is the path we're listening on. So this function here will only respond to requests on the get path, using the get method on the / path. So only a limited range of requests. Down here, we can see app.any, and any sound is exactly what it sounds like. It will respond to any HTTP request using any HTTP method, but still only on the / path. If we were to change this to post, then it would respond to only post requests on the / path. And then down here, we have app.any birds, and it will only respond to requests on the birds path, but with any HTTP method. But again, we could change it to example for put, and then it would only respond to put requests on the birds path. As you can see, compared to regular Node.js, this is much more compact and easy to use, because in Node.js we'd have to do a complicated switch or if-else statement on all of the possible paths we want to cover, and also on the different methods. This is an easy way to specify different response behavior for requests on different paths. Another useful feature of Express is Express routers, and you can see example down here. First, we create a router by saying router is equal to express.router, and then we can say router.get / new post, and this router, just like the regular app, would respond to get requests on the / new post path. So in that regards, it's exactly the same as the app. However, then we say app.use / form router. So the router is basically like a sub app, you could call it a mini app almost, that only responds to paths that begin with /forum. So for this router method here, it will actually only respond to requests on the /form / new post path with the get request. So a router is basically a mini app, and you can see how this would be useful. When we get to more complicated apps, we're going to want to split up our app into multiple files so it doesn't get confusing to look at with thousands and thousands of lines. So you can imagine if you had, say, a website with some informational pages, but then also a form, you might put all of the informational pages on the app and then register a router on the /forum path, and then put the router in a new file. And then you could deal with all of the router requests there, and that allows you to kind of split up the functionality of your website. And it might be difficult to imagine how to use it properly now, but when we get to chapter 9, where we create our own forum app, you'll see how this becomes useful. I hope you understood that all well. If not, then don't worry, you can always rewatch the video, and we'll test your knowledge of this functionality in the mini project at the end, and if you get stuck, then there'll always be the walkthrough. One thing you might be wondering is, do I really have to rewrite all of like, for example, if you had some shared functionality between two paths, you might be thinking, well, that means I'd have to rewrite it for each path, but that's not the case. We'll see in the next video, by using Express Middleware, how you can avoid rewriting code and have the same functionality on two different paths. See you then. Welcome back. In this video we're going to learn about Express Middleware, which is another useful feature that allows you to combine functionality across multiple routes. On screen now, just like in the last video, I have the URL of the official Express tutorial on middleware, and if you'd prefer a text-based guide, this is for you. Otherwise, I'll explain the basics of middleware here. Middleware is basically a function that takes place in the middle of the request-response cycle and allows you to split up the process of handling a request into multiple parts, some of which might be shared across routes. So a good example of a real-world use of middleware would be, for example, if you have several pages, like a create new post page and a profile page on the forum, that all require logging in. You could have authentication as a middleware function that happens across all of those routes to ensure that authentication happens before it even gets to the stage where it's able to start modifying their profile or create a new post, for example. And that will avoid you duplicating code across multiple routes because the same function will be executed against both. So a simple example of middleware would be to create middleware that happens across the entire app. So what we'll do is we'll say app.use and then we'll register our function like so. And then we'll do console.log sorry about this, time, and then date.now. And this will log out the time that the request is received to the console anytime any request is received. So by doing this, by doing this, we log out the time of any request we receive on any path by putting it to app.use. Now there's two important things to know about middleware. One is middleware functions are executed in the order they're defined. So this app.use will always happen before any of the routes below it because it's been defined in the code first, and so the one that's defined first happens first. And the second thing is this parameter called next, and next is the next function in the middleware stack, as it's called. So you can have as many middleware functions in the stack as you want, but you need the next parameter. So this one could also have next, but we just wouldn't use it. And all middleware must do one of two things. So middleware must either call the next function once it's done, which will call the next middleware function in the middleware stack, or it must do res.send, which will end the response stream with some data. If it doesn't do one of those, the request will be left hanging and the client will be waiting for ages and not receive a response. So you always have to do one of the two. Now app.use is one way to define middleware that happens across the entire app, but as we saw from routers before, we can just also define router.use some middleware, and then we can do the same thing as we did above and put some new functionality in here. So a good example would be if a forum, like to view forum pages, you might not necessarily always need to be logged in. But for example, if you had a subrouter called profile and you have profiles, different pages in the profile tab, for example, like security settings, change email, change password, bio, and so forth, then you could put those all under one router and then do router.use and then assign a middleware function that ensures the user is authenticated before they can do anything else. So that's one useful feature. And finally, you can also define middleware on specific routes. So if I do if I modify the above here with this, then this middleware function here will only execute on the path with /. So you can also create multiple middleware functions for one path. And the last thing I'm going to teach about in this video is middleware stacks. So we can define multiple middleware in one call. So this is one middleware function, but then we can also pass another middleware function like so. And then this one maybe we put down and this middleware stack would then first log out the time, only if it's on the / path, then log out hello world, and then it would send hello world to the client finally on request.get. If it was on post, then it would not respond, which wouldn't be good. So you wouldn't want to do that. But on the get path, then these three things would be executed in the order they're defined. We'll see more uses of middleware when it comes to more complicated apps that require logging in, such as in Chapter 9, where this will become very, very important indeed. One final thing to note is the middleware can be used on multiple paths without needing to use a router, and you can do that by using regular expressions to define multiple paths. This is something we'll see in a future chapter, so don't worry too much about that now, but it is a useful feature that we will cover later on. In the next video, we'll learn how to serve static files in Express, which is an extremely useful feature that will make our life so much easier And this will be a very short video, but one that's very powerful. So see you then. Welcome back. In this tutorial, we're going to learn about this very simple way that we can serve static files using Express. Static files are simply files that do not change, which are all the files we've dealt with so far. When we come on to templating later, that's an example of a non-static file, and you wouldn't be able to use the Express method of serving static files to do that. However, I'm sure you'll remember the amount of code we had to write to deal with different MIME types and so forth when serving lots of static files in chapter 2 of the course. Well, we're going to replace that all with one line in Express, which is why it's so useful. So all we're going to do is do app.use and then a root, so maybe /assets, and then express.static assets, and that's it. Assuming that there's a folder called assets in the same folder as server.js, then all of the files in assets will be served by Express. If someone, for example, if there's a file called style.css in the folder assets, someone who writes localhost 8080 /assets /style.css will get style.css or any other files in that folder. Now, this is the mount path, but the mount path doesn't always have to be the same as the folder path, so I could just call it nothing. So if we just get rid of this entirely, then if someone now types in localhost 8080 /style.css, then it will actually serve assets /style.css. So it's called the mount path, and you can change that to be whatever you want or nothing at all. And that's how you serve a plethora of static files in Express much easier than you would be able to in Node.js. See you in the next video.